Welcome to Pioneer Mindset, a place where we challenge our mindset and address the discomfort in both business and life by finding clarity resulting in bold conviction. I'm your host, Garrett Ruskamp, fifth generation farmer, husband, and father from rural Nebraska. Whether you're navigating frustration from past decisions or worry about the uncertainty you face today in your business, we're going to learn from our struggles and take on new challenges with a resilient mindset. Join me as I share my journey of struggles I faced in agriculture as a farmer and family man. I'm ready to dive into honest conversations to tackle the mindsets surrounding key issues that rural ag business owners face that will ultimately help you gain control, leading to a profitable and sustainable business. Let's adapt to Pioneer Mindset and get to it. Welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode of Pioneer Mindset. So when I prepare my episodes, sometimes I've really got some different thoughts going on, some different ideas where I have a really good general idea as to how I want to take the episode or how I want to lay out my different episodes. If you actually look back in the past, we had a few episodes where I had guest episodes and they're all really tied together nicely and really try to make that a nice package to, make listeners have something that's kind of builds upon each other, right? And so for this week's episode, sometimes when it comes to recording these, we get to like the day of where we have the deadline to have this recorded by. And I'm like, oh, shoot, I got to record an episode today. What are we going to talk about? What are we going to actually talk about that's meaningful for the listener, for you, something that you find kind of engaging, something that you find valuable, right? And so I had a couple different thoughts that I had kind of running through my mind, and they do kind of tie together. So we're going to kind of basically lean into that a little bit and see once where it goes, right? And so here recently, actually this last weekend, we took some time and we were cleaning our shop out. And this was a really big daunting task that we had on our to-do list for a long time, but it just never really found its way to the top, right? And so our shop had gotten just really dirty. And it's not a large shop, but it just gets filled with crap and junk. And just we sometimes keep the door open, so it gets really dusty and just dirt in there and everywhere. And so anyways, the shop, it just was terrible. And it was literally just got to the point where we needed to do something about it. We needed to take care of this. Like it made its way to the top of the priority list. And so sometimes, when things are simple, as far as like we start out by a shop like that, if we can do simple maintenance or simple cleaning and stay on top of things. And if we don't do those things, it gets out of control fast. And that's kind of what happened here with our shop. I honestly can't remember last time we deep cleaned it really good, went through it, threw away anything that was junk that had just been sitting up in the shop, taking up space. Things that didn't need to be in there, like it just really organized it. It's probably been several years, to be honest. And so it got out of control fast. And really what happens is it basically kind of comes down to, when we get these big, hairy things like the shop was, this big, dusty, hairy thing that we didn't want to touch. We know that it's dirty, but we keep putting it off. We got other things to do, or we got to go spend time with family versus cleaning the shop, or we've got to go combine corn today versus cleaning the shop, or make hay while the sun shines, right? And so there's so much other stuff that we need to do that we put some of these different things off. And like I said, it gets out of control fast. And sometimes it just gets bad enough where we can't take it anymore. And that's really what this came down to. It made its way to the top of the to-do list. We had other things we could have done this weekend on Saturday, and we didn't even get done because other things did kind of come up. They did take priority, and that's the hard part about some of these things when they can easily be put off. That's what happens is they easily get put off, right? And so it got bad enough to where all of a sudden we kind of go back to this phrase, and it kind of aligns with this, is the pain of staying the same has to outweigh the pain of change. So in this case, basically the eyesore, the chaos, this disorganization of the shop and just the clutter and just got so overwhelming that I finally had to say, okay, enough is enough. And we had to outweigh kind of that pain of change, literally just being able to make it a priority. And so we finally did it. We started working on it. And like I said, we didn't even get done because we got tied up. So we got about half done and hopefully be able to get a chance to get to the rest of it here soon. But that's really what it came down to, was kind of that the pain of staying the same has to outweigh the pain of change, right? And so with that, we finally were able to get to that. So going to my next topic here, next point of interest that I want to talk about is I actually last night got a Snapchat from a good friend of mine. It was pretty late, and he was working on his books, right? And it was probably about 11:30, something like that. And he was still working on his books, getting things organized. And it was basically the Snapchat was, I'm separating the men from the boys, as he was working on his books and trying to get everything updated before we get into the harvest, before we get into the fall, the busy season, to where back to the priorities, right? Back to where things get pushed off. And books is one of those things, just like the shop, that can easily be pushed off. It's like, well, if I don't get this done today, it's not like the cattle are going to die, right? I need to feed the cattle. Or if I don't get this done today, it's not like I'm going to lose bushels on my crop, right? Or, there's just different things where all those, they've really fall back down to that priority list. And so taking care of the books is one of those things. And I applaud this guy for taking the time to actually do it and saying enough is enough, back to that kind of pain of staying the same, and making sure that he can get this updated before he gets into the busy season, before there's really no choice. We have to go, go, go and do what's on the to-do list, right? There's no choice of, am I going to be working on books today or am I going to be combining corn? Well, we all know the answer there, right? If we can only do so much, only so many hours in the day, we're going to go combine corn all day long. We know that. That's what we do as farmers and ranchers. We're really good at, or take care of the livestock, whatever the case is. And so with this, like I said, really applaud him for going and actually taking the time to work on that. And so, and especially even just to make time late at night, even though it's Sunday evening is when it was. And I give him a lot of applause for doing that, because that's not even something I would like to do. Working on books on a Sunday night isn't necessarily ideal, but kudos to him. Okay. And so with this, we talk about separating the men from the boys and kind of maybe starting down this trajectory I want to go down as far as, are you willing to do the things that others won't? Okay. And so with this, separating the men from the boys, how can we take this one step further? Like I said, really good. Kudos to him. But how can we take this one step further? Because yeah, we all don't want to be boys anymore. We want to be men. We want to take that step up and actually take charge, right? And take ownership, right? And as the business owners, we need to actually take ownership. But how do we take this one step further and go from separating the men to the businessmen? Okay. And so how do we do that? If we're quoting ourselves as men, as business owners, are we just kind of updating books? Are we just paying bills, trying to do things that we need to? Are we trying to enter in everything in QuickBooks so we stay organized there, so we don't fall behind there? So it becomes this big daunting task like the shop was. And that's why this all kind of ties back to that is, we have this big daunting task. As soon as we push this off, it gets bigger and harder to tackle and less likely to actually happen. So that's usually the case when it comes to bookwork. Well, because it's not a priority, because we keep pushing it off, because we're all of a sudden 6 months behind on updating our QuickBooks, yes, maybe we paid the bills. Yes, maybe we wrote the checks that we needed to make sure that we don't fall behind there. But what about actually entering that into QuickBooks? What about actually taking that information and using it to make the best decisions possible? Okay. That's to where also now we can maybe start separating the men from the businessmen. Okay. So what does that actually look like? So we ask ourselves, are we just updating the books? Are we just paying the bills? Are we just doing the bare minimum to get by? Are we just doing what we can to somewhat stay up to date to kind of feel better about it? Or are we maybe taking the time to actually update a balance sheet? Are we taking the time to actually update our cost of production with actuals as we enter those in or as we go throughout the year? Are we putting together a cash flow for the rest of the year? As we record this, we're looking at mid-September. And so this is generally a time of year where maybe some people have a little bit extra time, kind of like my friend here who was willing to actually sit down and update the books and willing to actually do that. But this is also the time that, hey, do we need to maybe actually as businessmen put together the rest of the cash flow for the rest of the year so we have an idea as to what that's going to look like as we start to have a kind of a grasp as to what kind of crop we're going to be harvesting, maybe be able to take that and update a cash flow projection. And so we can just kind of finish out the rest of the year strong and be proactive in making that plan, whether that's a bumper crop situation, whether you're in a crop insurance situation and not exactly sure what's going to be out there. It's good for us to realize, what are we going to have coming in for income? What are we going to have going out for expenses? And to kind of build out the rest of that cash flow plan. As the business owner, take control of that cash flow. So are you going to do that? And then the other thing here is starting to work on a break even for next year. Starting to really focus on next year and what that looks like. 2025's crop is pretty much made. Yes, besides getting into the bin, there's a lot of things we still need to focus on there. But this is the point where we also need to kind of turn our focus to next year, look at 2026 ready. And next year does not look good, folks. If you have not sat down to do any sort of projections yet, and side comment here, back to like the shop. If you don't enjoy cleaning, if you don't enjoy organizing, you're probably going to have a really hard time focusing on that. If your situation is not ideal, if it's not very fun, if it's a small shop, if it's really dirty, if there's a lot of things you'd like to change about it, you're probably not going to want to focus on it as well. You're probably not going to want to move that to the top of that priority. You're probably not going to give it the full attention that it needs. Same thing with the bookwork. If you've got a situation that does not look very good, you're probably definitely going to want to push that one off. You just maybe don't want to face reality, or at least least not today, right? That's tomorrow's problem or next week's problem or next month's problem. All of a sudden, we're 6 months later and we haven't done a damn thing about this, right? So starting to work on the projections for next year as we look at 2026. And whenever I do my projections, I'm fairly conservative. I like to use crop insurance guarantee numbers when it comes to factoring in that revenue. And so I want to know what's the bare minimum at the end of the day. If I lay my head down at night and we get a disaster that comes through, we got an epic drought like 2012, or we get derecho like they had in the Midwest a few years ago, or we get a hailstorm. What's the bare minimum that I'm going to be able to come in from collect for a crop insurance standpoint? All right. Using that number can sometimes turn the screen pretty red in some cases, right? So we get looking at numbers that just do not look good. And when we look at numbers that don't look good, it's pretty easy for us to get into a scarcity mindset, to get kind of almost in our own shell. And like, why would I want to face this when I can just go outside and get the combine ready, go grease it up, go wash it up, get the truck ready, get ready for harvest, do everything that does need to be done. Don't get me wrong. But what about the numbers? What about if you're willing to separate yourself as a boy to a man? What about separating the man to the businessman, right? And so that's what we're talking about here today. So this kind of brings me back to this phrase. I'm going to repeat it a couple times throughout the rest of this episode. But to have what others don't, you have to do what others won't, okay? And you've probably heard that phrase to some extent or kind of some version of it. But to have what others don't, you have to do what others won't. And so in this case, talking about being a businessman, doing what others won't. Doing, in this case, as the farmer, as a rancher that owns the business, that owns the farm, that owns the ranch, that has to take control, that has to be the owner of it, take ownership, and be willing to do the things that others won't. And I've actually been trying to focus on, because we've had a little bit of time here lately, I've been able to spend a few hours in the office, especially last couple of weeks really, and trying to really dial back into this, trying to make sure that we get our cash flow projections updated for the rest of the year, trying to make sure they match our marketing plan, trying to put basically a break-even projection together for next year for our crops, seeing what that actually looks like. And by the way, having an idea what the facts are, just knowing what the facts are, kills a lot of scarcity. And I've mentioned that before, but I hone in on that one once again, because knowing what the facts are kills a lot of scarcity. As I record this today, and if it's mid-September 2025, looking at my projections for next year, my break-even projections, and if they look negative, at least I have an opportunity to do something about it. All right, at least I have a chance to be proactive versus, well, we're sitting here in July from last year, July 2026. Let's fast forward, and this crop's already made. Now, how do I do the best I can to actually make money? Well, maybe we should have asked ourselves that question before we start spending all this money on this year's crop. So, don't want to get into that soapbox, but these are the things that we can ultimately do to step up to that next level, right? To go from being men to businessmen, and really thinking about this from a business mindset approach. Not just solely, I love what I do on the farm and there's nothing wrong with that, but let's make sure that we can actually be profitable. Let's make sure that we can be money. Let's do our due diligence for ourselves, for our families that we have to sacrifice when we're out there doing all of the work. Let's make sure that we can do our best, right? One of the ways that we can do that is actually putting on our businessman hat, taking the time to focus on the business versus just in the business, right? So that's like I said, I applaud this guy for actually taking the time to work on the books. But let's maybe take it one step further. All right, give yourself a pat on the back, and then let's take this one step further if we can. All right, let's making sure that we're setting ourselves for success, or at least doing the best we can, making the best decisions possible with the best information that we have. That's ultimately when it comes to putting all this information together, putting all the cash flows together, updating the balance sheet. Me as the business coach, as I work with clients with Pioneer Farmer, I can't go to their farms. I can't plant a money tree in their backyard. I can't change their situation with a snap of the fingers or overnight, right? That's just not how life works. And we all know that. And sometimes we come into that with a false sense of reality. But with that being said, back to what I said before, just knowing what the facts are allows us to kill that scarcity and allows us to be proactive. Now we can make the best decisions possible with the best information that we have. Before, we're trying to make the best decisions possible with probably false information or information that we don't have, or with gut decisions, or with decisions from people around us, where people maybe don't even know their information, know their numbers, right? And so that's where I'm just really trying to hone in on that one. To have what others don't, you have to be willing to do what others won't. And kind of to build upon that, I did an episode a few weeks back. I can't remember which one it is. Go back and look it up, but asking ourselves, what do you want? Kind of that simple question of what do you actually want? right? And so, what are you trying to accomplish here? What do you actually want in each of the different areas here of our life? And so, you got to ask yourselves that, figure out what you want. I mean, do you want what others have? Do you want the things that they're willing to enjoy and the benefits that they have in their life? And now, are you willing to do what it takes to actually get there? Or maybe get to the things that you actually want? So, the next kind of area I want to build upon here is of kind of that on that same phrase is talking about something that I actually went through here, kind of on the physical health side of things. So, here a couple weeks ago, it was actually a week prior, I ran in a 5K race here in a local town. Really nice small town. It was called the Heroes Run in honor of September 11th. That was ahead of September 11th. So, we ran in the Heroes Run, which is just a 5K race. But, we say just a 5K, and we say that to maybe kind of lower that bar to some extent, as in like, and I say that because, I feel like there's bigger things out there. There's people that look like a 5K, which is 3.1 miles, by the way, and think that's just kind of a walk in the park, right? Walk through the countryside. I mean, that's not even a full quarter around kind of a section there, right? And so we think about that, but at the same time, asking yourselves, for me, I had set my goals on running a 5K. I'm not a runner by no means. I did not like running in school. I hated track. I thought running was kind of pointless. Yes, I understand that there's a lot of physical health side of things. I understand that's a really good thing to prioritize, but I did not like running. I just don't like it. But every time that I started to go running, I really enjoyed what it did for me, like physically and mentally. A lot of clarity there. It just made me feel good about being able to accomplish something. So I wanted to actually set a goal and try to accomplish that. So I set a goal of running in this 5K specifically. And so with that, I was able to do it. I was able to run my race. It wasn't pretty because I was actually sick like the week before that. It was kind of a struggle, but we got through it, ran the entire thing, had a decent time, and we did it, right? And so I was kind of curious, and I say all of this not to toot my own horn, not to brag, not to anything like that, because I try to pride myself on being a very honest and humble person. And that's why sometimes we downplay when we say that I only ran a 5K, or, it's only a 5K. It's only 3 miles, right? Well, at the end of the day, it is kind of a big deal. And I bring that up because I was curious to know how many people have actually ran in 5K before. And kind of the numbers that I came up with was roughly about 2.5% of people have actually ran in a 5K race and actually entered in and actually finished it and actually ran in a 5K race. And so I said, okay, well, I'm among the 2.5% of, Americans that are actually willing to put myself out there to go into a physical event like this and run the entire race, run a 5K race. Okay. So I want to take that one step further though, because I also asked, how many of those people are males or females? Because when I showed up that day to the race, there was some people that did the walking portion, people that did the running, but either way, I'd say majority of them were actually women, right? And so how many of those people are actually men that were willing to run in that race? Maybe going back to that phrase, separating the boys from the men. And there again, not trying to say this boastfully, but most of the people that run in races are about 60% of them are women. So a majority of those people are women, but less of those folks are actually men, right? And so I'm of the minority, I'm of people that are actually willing to do this. So we can drop that percentage down one step further because I wanted to take this to another level here. How many of these people, I wonder, were actually farmers or ranchers or involved in agriculture in any way? And I'd say very, very few. I don't know how many people ran in this race in our local town, but I'd say maybe one or two other people, something like that, were farmers who were involved in agriculture. Maybe there were some farmers' wives there. I mean, so a couple more in that realm, but just trying to look at myself, trying to, I'd say, build up this thing that I actually did, going back to have what others don't. You have to be willing to do what they won't. And I feel like that's something that I was able to do. Running my race, being in a very, very small percentage of farmers that are actually willing to be physically active and to run in a race, farmers, ranchers, businessmen, whatever the case is. And I actually did it, right? And so I set my goals on that and I actually did it. I did the hard thing and I actually got after it, right? And so I did something that 99% of the other people won't. Once again, not trying to pat myself on the back, not trying to build myself up, but it's good for us to acknowledge our accomplishments. So how does this tie back to cleaning our shop? How does this tie back to like this Snapchat from the front? How does this tie back to anything to do with Pioneer Mindset and everything we're talking about today? Well, it goes back to this phrase that I keep mentioning that you're probably tired of hearing, but to have what others don't, you have to be willing to do what others won't. And this goes for each of the areas in core four, the core four that we talk about all the time on this podcast: our body, our being, our balance, and our business. So, starting with body, obviously, I just talked about that one. What are you willing to do that others won't? Well, I guess in my case, I was willing to run a 5K race. And hopefully for me, that's just a stepping stone to something a little bit bigger and to keep going there. Right. And that is something that we can use these little wins to build upon. And that goes for each of these areas. So we talk about body. Are you willing to maybe get up and do a walk or a run or lift some weights or do some sort of physical exercise in the morning? And then being your spiritual connection with God, your confidence and certainty. Are you willing to, in this case, put yourself out there to be uncomfortable and to put yourself into a situation that you've never done before, face your fears, and by doing that, create a sense of confidence and even resiliency within yourself? Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to build yourself up and do that to build your being, right? In this case, talk about our connection with God and our confidence, right? And so back to the connection, are you willing to are you willing to speak your mind about your faith? Are you willing to acknowledge your faith to yourself and not hide from it? Are you willing to, maybe get up in there every morning and have that conversation with God, or read the Bible, do a Bible in a year, or read the entire thing, or say a devotional before bedtime? Are you willing to do those things so that way you can have, a good solid relationship with God, a really solid confidence in yourself and your being and your connection there? And then the balance side of things, all right? So one thing here when it comes to balance, which is your relationships and your family, once again, I feel like you're probably wondering why I keep talking about myself so much. Well, it's easier to talk about ourselves, right? It's easy to talk about our situation, what we know. And so I hope it's relatable back to everything you're doing. But this last week, I was actually taking care of the kids playing Mr. Dad or Mr. Mom, right? My wife was gone. She was actually helping family. So she's gone for about 4 or 5 days. And so I was playing Mr. Mom and got to take care of the kids and really build up that relationship, even between me and my wife, that she could trust that I was willing to take care of everything so she could kind of go do her own thing. I think that's important. So kind of building up that relationship, doing things that others maybe won't. A lot of dads out there would have a hard time taking care of the kids for that long with the wife gone. And I'll be honest, it wasn't easy. And I had a lot of help. I had my mom that helped me a lot. I had my mother-in-law that brought us some supper. So I had a lot of help, but I didn't do it alone. I definitely didn't to do it all by myself. And the kids were really well behaved. So it was all in all a really good week. But then building up the relationship, it was nice to spend time with the kids and evenings, be intentional with just being present with them, focusing on doing the best that I can to be patient when things don't go well, and just being present with them and building up that relationship, putting it a deposit, especially before we get into the busy season there. So, that's one thing that, maybe a lot of other people wouldn't be willing to do. Maybe that's something that you can do. Maybe you can give your wife the opportunity to go away for a day or two. Maybe you can just be there even when she's around, to be present and to build that relationship up. Do the things that others won't so you can have what they don't. Okay. And so then the business side of things, we've been talking about that in this entire time. What are you willing to do in the business side of things? Are you willing to do the tasks that you maybe don't have time for, but you know that if you put them off, it'll just get worse and worse, like cleaning the shop or maintenance on the equipment, or maybe taking care of the books and maybe updating the balance sheet, the cash flow, and taking care of all the numbers that need to be done as businessmen, taking ownership of business owners, taking ownership of that business and actually taking care of business there, right? And so are you willing to do those things? And so as we get to rounding this out, as we get to talking about all of this and we try to tie it all together, these are kind of almost individual thoughts that I had on each of these different areas. But I do think at the end of the day, it does kind of tie all back together. And we can really tie it all back together with core four, like we talked about. What do you want in each of those different areas? Are you willing to do what it takes to actually get that? And so as we get to really rounding this out, in closing, are you willing to do what the other 99% aren't? And in that, like I said, not that we can brag, not that this will build up our ego, although there is a side of ego that is not a bad thing because it builds up our confidence and allows us to step out and be uncomfortable. Our ego can be our best friend or our worst enemy. But in this case, we're trying to build it up. And so that way we have the confidence to go do hard things, to go do something that's uncomfortable, to face our fears and actually get after it, right? And so acknowledging that, hey, I ran my race. I did something that 99 other percent of the people will not willing to do. That just builds up my confidence that I can go do other hard things. Literally, I got done that day after running my race. And I'm like, this was hard. And I did it. I accomplished it. And I just felt so proud of myself, but also like, what other thing that's going to come my day can I not accomplish? Like I can take on things because I did this one hard thing, right? Yes, it may not be perfect. Yes, it might be a challenge, but I know that I am capable of actually accomplishing that. Side note, one of the affirmations that I'm willing to share that I say every day to myself and multiple times a day, and just to kind of remind myself of who I am and who I'm trying to be, is I say, I am a strong, honest family man who's willing to be uncomfortable, adaptive, and progressive. I can and I will. I say that to myself to build up my confidence, to build up my ego, so that way I can go do hard things, so I can go do the things that 99% of others aren't willing to do. So, what can you do today, tomorrow, next week? What can you do to take action to do what the other 99% won't? What are you willing to do that I won't do? Okay. What are you willing to do that the others around you won't do? That's the big point here as I want to drive this home is what are you willing to do? What can you do today? What can you do to take action to get the things that you want and actually get after it and take control? That's all I got for today's episode. Get after it. Figure out what that is and go do it. I hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode, and we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for tagging along with me today as we sharpened our mindsets. If you've gained insight from today's episode, be sure to take a screenshot to share or send this episode to somebody who might also find value in it. For more, follow me on Instagram @GarrettRuskamp or on Facebook, and join me next time for more conviction through clarity.